Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Kegan Kline is the guy you want to be guilty of the Delphi murders. I mean, obviously, you don't want him to have committed the murders. It's just that he's been sentenced to 43 years for a list of crimes so appalling that it's really difficult to drum up any sympathy for him. On the day that Libby and Abby disappeared, Kegan Kline lived in Peru, Indiana, 40 miles from Delphi. He's now in jail for 43 years, as I said, having pled guilty to a host of evil offenses relating to children. But was he involved with the murders of Libby German and Abby Williams? Today, we're going to look at that question. He is not on trial, nor is he charged with the murders of Libby and Abby. Richard Allen is the guy about to go on trial in just under 2 weeks. But Richard Allen names several suspects he says are far more likely to have committed the crime. And today we're going to talk about Kegan Kline. Kline admits to being in the area where the bodies were found on the day of the murders, nearby anyway. We'll look at what charges he's pled guilty to. I'm going to go very lightly on describing them because I just don't want to do any detail. I just don't want to get into it. There are a lot of sympathetic ears to the idea that he could be guilty because what he is accused of is so incredibly upsetting. Richard Allen wants to point the finger at him, but the judge has said no, has said that that's not going to come into trial and he won't be allowed to point the finger, blame Kegan Kline. But so the question really is, did Kegan Kline have anything to do with the murders of Libby German and Abby Williams on February 13th, 2017? That's what we're going to talk about tonight. We are focused on the documents and the legal science because that's what channel you've hit. I want to say a special shout out to the first 5 in the chat: Sky Goddess, Denise Pelton, SP74, Misconstrue, and Carol Sue Scott. All right, so let's take a look at probably the most important document. This is related to a search warrant. Let me add it to the stage. Okay, and as I said, I plan to go very lightly through this, leaving out a lot. The undersigned says, and let me go ahead and set the stage for us. So what this is a trooper is filing this with the court and suggesting that there is probable cause to arrest Kegan Kline. And the date of this is February 25th, 2017. So this is less than 2 weeks after Libby and Abby had disappeared. And a law enforcement officer, Trooper David Vito, is saying, we got enough here to arrest Kegan Kline for this. The undersigned says on February 25th, 2017, the Indiana State ISP and the Federal Bureau of Investigations, FBI, executed a search warrant at, and it's blocked out, while working ISP case blocked out. The FBI sent information to the ISP Cyber Crimes Unit that an adult male was soliciting female juveniles utilizing the social media platforms Snapchat and Instagram. The adult male was using the username Anthony Schott. Subpoenas were sent to Instagram and Snapchat for the Anthony Schott's account information. The Instagram and Snapchat returns provided Comcast IP addresses. A subpoena was sent to Comcast for the IP addresses associated with the Anthony Schott's account, and they returned to, redacted, in Peru, Indiana. The Instagram subpoena advised the Anthony Schott's account was registered on 7/20/2016, a year before the girls were killed, little less. And the Snapchat return advised the account was registered on 7/14/2016. Again, a little less than a year before the girls were found. On February 25th, 2017, at approximately 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you have to sort of recognize that at this point, anybody and everybody is looking for whoever killed Libby and Abby. Their bodies were found the day after they disappeared on February 14th, Valentine's Day, 2017. And everybody is looking for them. So and on that day, a search warrant was executed on the residence by ISP, FBI, and the Peru Police Department. Redacted and his son, Kegan Anthony Kline, were located in the residence. So there were two people there. And the father figures throughout this. We're going to hear more about the father as we look into the allegations against Kegan Kline. At approximately 12:35 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Redacted was interviewed by ISP Sergeant Kunstek and FBI Special Agent Willman. Blank was Redacted, was read his rights and agreed to speak with investigators. Redacted confirmed they had Comcast as their internet provider and it was a secured network. Redacted told investigators that Kegan did use Instagram and Snapchat. So almost surely what's happened is they've gone in and they've talked to the father and they've asked him various questions like, does your son use Instagram and Snapchat, which was something they were looking at? And who is your secure network provider? And they're looking for the IP address, things like that. At approximately 1:25 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Kegan Kline was interviewed by ISP Sergeant Kunstek and FBI Special Agent Willman. Kegan was read his rights and agreed to speak with investigators. During Kegan's interview, he initially denied creating fake social media accounts and talking to underage girls. So he's saying, no, that never wasn't me. Don't look at me. Later in the interview, he admitted to creating the Anthony Shots profile and speaking to underage girls. Kegan told investigators he created the accounts approximately 6 months ago, which that much at least is true. Kegan stated he talks to girls he knows personally and girls he doesn't know personally. Kegan stated he meets girls on Instagram. He said he knows the age of the girls he communicates with because he talks to them. Kegan stated if a girl told him she was 16 or under, he wouldn't care and would still talk to them. Kegan told investigators he finds girls on Instagram and then tells them to talk to him on Snapchat. Kegan admitted to speaking to approximately 15 girls that were underage and advised he probably received pictures from every one of them. He advised he saved their pictures to his gallery. During his interview, Kegan stated that he was effed and he should have left. Kegan advised he packed another bag and took it to Las Vegas. Redacted and Kegan returned from Las Vegas on February 25th, 2017. He stated he was going to leave when his dad was asleep. Kegan told investigators the main phone he uses is the white iPhone 5C. Now, that white iPhone 5C is going to figure very prominently because it's the one phone that Kegan held on to and did not turn over to law enforcement. You're going to hear that he, in fact, deleted programs and apps that were on that phone. After Kegan's interview, he was polygraphed at the Peru State Police Post by Sergeant Matthew Collins. Kegan and Sergeant Collins spoke about this incident and case. Kegan again admitted to creating the fake Anthony Shots profiles and speaking to underage girls. And the reason we'll actually watch as law enforcement releases the information about Anthony Shots, but here's essentially the bottom line about what was happening. Anthony Shots was just a fake created account. It wasn't real. Anthony Shots was someone who was actually a model, but Kegan Kline, according to his admission, just took those photographs and released them. And he pretended to be this male model, this young guy who was a male model when he talked to the girls, but it wasn't anything that he actually did. Kegan described, let me back up just a minute. Kegan told Sergeant Collins the girls ranged from 15 to 17 years old, and he knew their ages because they told him how old they were. Kegan age girls. Kegan described S approximately 20 videos, S pictures as, I am deleting some parts here. Kegan also advised he received approximately 20 videos of underage girls and stated that he would, I'm just leaving out lots of stuff. Anyway, they were just, everything about this is wildly inappropriate by this adult dealing with underage girls. He also communicated this to the girls who were sending the pictures and videos. His polygraph questions were based on case, and it's redacted, but we can guess that's probably the Delphi murders case. Kegan's polygraph was concluded at approximately 7:30 p.m., and he was transported back to his residence. I presume he must have passed that, else perhaps they would have arrested him more quickly. They never have arrested him for the Delphi murders. The undersigned has watched the interview and polygraph recordings of Kegan Kline. Multiple electronic devices were seized during the warrant, including, and they name a bunch, the most important of which is not in that list. On February 27th, 2017, this is 2 days after he's been interviewed and given a polygraph, Kegan contacted ISP Cybercrimes Unit and told them he located his Apple iPhone 5C that wasn't taken during the warrant. On March 2nd, 2017, the unit obtained the iPhone 5C from the ISP Peru Post. In other words, he turned this in, and now it's given to the people in charge of the investigation. And they go through each of the phones or devices in turn, starting with an Apple iPhone 4, which he used when he was about 22 years old. And he communicated with female teens and shared media files depicting CSAM. The user also portrayed themselves as a female teen using the name Emily Ann 45. Then moving on to, there are a lot of things that are redacted through here related to messages sent back and forth. And we will zip down to the part where we start talking next about the next phone. Well, there are various phones through here because he used several devices and changed fairly frequently as well. So I'm moving quickly. It's a long document. You can see all these, and you see a lot of the Emily Ann 45 in there. So let's keep going down. I'm looking for, okay. And he found, the law enforcement officer says he found numerous images and videos depicting child P, and talked about what he found, and it was appalling. The Apple iPhone 3G had Skype or Kick Messenger in over 200 still images. 27 of them appeared to be females, at least 14. My math says that means the vast majority were not, did not even appear to be females at least 14 years of age out of the 200. Samsung Galaxy S4. This phone was named, and he names it, was last utilized on approximately June 25th, 2015. So one of the reasons law enforcement is saying this is what he was doing right around the times of the Delphi murders. It wasn't isolated. Similar things have been going on for years. The forensic analysis showed the device was powered on multiple days after this date, but not utilized on those days. Kegan would have been 21 years old at this time. There were many chat conversations recovered from this device. Several conversations appeared to be with a female teen, approximately 12 or 13 years old. The user also used two profiles, Kegan Kline and Emily Ann, who is Kegan's stepsister, to communicate with female teens. Conversations were found on this device where Emily discussed having sex with Kegan and his father at the same time. Multiple CSAM files found on there. We're just going to skip through this. Apple iPod Touch. They found more images. They couldn't tell how old the women were. But one of the important things, the images were from the local area. So they were from people who weren't so far away that it was basically out of reach or out of possibility for him to go meet these people. And now we get to the Apple iPhone 5C. This phone was named Kegan's phone and was the phone he turned in to the Indiana State Police. The phone was last utilized on approximately February 27, 2017. Kegan would have been 22 years old at this time. The user of this device used Facebook, Instagram, MeetMe, Snapchat, and Twitter to communicate or chat. Much of this data from these applications was deleted from the device. The examination found multiple still images saved to the device that depicted females posing without clothing. The ages were indeterminate. On approximately 2:27 at 9:48 hours, the user cleared or deleted the Safari web browser history and website data from this device. During the examination, some information was recovered. And while looking over the digital forensic exam, we're almost finished, by the way, on this document. The digital forensics examination report, I noticed the user deleted multiple items off the phone before turning it in to law enforcement. On February 25th, they serve a search warrant. They interview Kegan Kline, they polygraph him, and 2 days later, he calls the police to turn in this phone. On February 25th, 2017, at approximately 7:30 p.m., Kegan's polygraph was concluded and he was transported back to his residence. The digital forensics examination report shows at approximately 9:19 p.m., the user of the iPhone 5C started to uninstall and delete apps from the phone. At approximately 9:19 p.m., the user uninstalled and deleted Snapchat. Then at 10:14, the user uninstalled and deleted Instagram. Then the next day, the user uninstalled and deleted Meet Me, and then put Snapchat back on the device. And then at 1:28, again, uninstalled Snapchat and deleted it from the phone. Kegan admitted to using these applications to chat with underage girls. The evidence contained in these applications were destroyed when the user deleted them from the device before turning it into law enforcement. Due to the aforementioned probable cause, I'm requesting this investigation be reviewed for consideration of charges. So you've got a law enforcement officer saying, let's go ahead and let me remove that. Let's go ahead and look into charging him, because this guy is just plain sketchy. He's just really sketchy. And so I want to take you through what happened then with Kegan Kline, and then turn to where it fits in with this particular case against Richard Allen. How do the two combine? So let's take a look next. And there was a probable cause search and an arrest of Kegan Kline 3 years after the murders, but it was not for the murders of Abby and Libby. Let's go ahead and take a look at what he was accused of. Wait, none of those are what I wanted to show you. It's shoot. Okay, well, I don't have it. I don't have it here, so I could get that really quick. Like, let's see. Or can I? I just wanted to show you the list of charges against him to which he pled guilty. Let me be very clear on that. So he actually stated that he himself was guilty. He pled guilty on that. I'm going to go into the file for this case, open up this, and hopefully be able to share the actual document with you. Here we go. Okay. Now I can add that to the stage. Okay, here is this massive list of charges against him. And you can see count. Solicitation, exploitation, P, synthetic identity, deception, obstruction of justice, multiple counts, all related to children, to underage people. And this chronicle of crimes were ones he actually entered. This is actually the order entering his guilty plea. He had pled not guilty. He withdrew that in favor of pleading guilty. He later regretted that deeply. He regretted that deeply because what happened next was he was sentenced to 43 years in prison. And he was extremely upset about that. He felt that his cooperation should have bought him more. So let's go ahead and add this back to the stage, and let me show you what he argued on appeal. Because he believed that he should have been given a much shorter sentence and that the court was too harsh on him, had calculated it wrong, and shouldn't have been allowed to do that. Okay. And that's the state court brief. Let me go ahead and start with Kegan's. Scoot over one. Okay. So this is Kegan's brief where he appealed to the Indiana Court of Appeals and said, 43 years, you're crazy. That's way too much. Absolutely outrageous. And here is what he argued. In August 2020, Kegan Kline was charged with 25 separate charges for child exploitation, solicitation, P, obstruction of justice, and identity deception. After several continuances, he pled guilty to all of the charges, which saved the state of Indiana the time and expense of a trial, and it saved the victims from having to testify. Very highly generous of him, may I add. After considering aggravating and mitigating factors, the court sentenced Kline to 43 years in the Department of Correction, with 40 years executed and 3 years on ex-offender probation. His sentence is manifestly unreasonable based on his character and the nature of the offense. I can't believe they argued that. Kline has no other criminal history, and he saved the state the time and expense of a trial. The court improperly determined the episodes of criminal conduct. And here's what they argue. They say, look, some of these were actually just one event, but he got charged and added time for multiple of these, and that really wasn't fair. Oh, thank you, Cutley. I'm sorry. I'm just now noticing your super chat. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Okay, the Supreme Court's held that criminal actions that were not precisely simultaneous or contemporaneous, but took place only seconds or minutes apart, were a single episode of criminal conduct. So in other words, if you're in the midst of one act, they can't break it apart and charge you for one act and then add another act and then another act. Whatever the penalty is for that one act, if it's all one thing, they only get to assess one penalty against you. That's what he's arguing. Kline believes the court erred by sentencing him for 5 separate episodes of criminal conduct when it sentenced him for counts 10 through 20. All of those counts were alleged to have occurred on or about February 25th, 2017. The crimes in this case were all committed remotely from Kline's home, and there was no evidence that he attempted to meet anyone. So that's sort of the work from home defense, which is if you work from home, then does it really count? That's sort of the argument being made. Okay, let's take a look at what the state said. They have like a great sentence in here that you'll like. A forensic search of Kline's devices uncovered thousands and thousands of messages sent by Kline to women and girls. Kline often communicated with the women and girls using his name, as well as 2 personas, Emily Ann and Anthony Schatz, we saw that, over a number of social media applications. Kline regularly messaged girls between the ages of 12 and 18. Anthony Schatz's persona was portrayed as a wealthy and well-traveled young man with a lot of luxury cars. The Emily Ann username was depicted as a young girl who reached out to others and commented on how pretty they were, and then described herself as being very ugly or worthless. Using the Emily Ann username, Kline would engage his victims by first garnering their sympathy based on Emily Ann's poor self-image and claims that her family members died or that she was addicted. Kline would share a picture of what purported to be Emily. Well, I'll just even skip that. When speaking as Emily Ann, Kline told the girls that he had a father, Adam, and a stepbrother, Kegan. And then he would say that Adam, the dad, in other words, had seen the girls' image and thought they were cute or hot. And he would ask whether they were willing to engage in activities with Adam. And he pretended to be Adam. At times, Kline had the Emily Ann account introduce girls to her stepbrother, Kegan Kline, who was depicted using the image he found online of someone else entirely, Vince Kowalski. Kline would propose a sugar daddy role, just like unbelievable. Then they list the various victims. I'm not going to go into any detail other than to say one was under 18, one was between 10 and 13, one was a 3 to 5 year old. I mean, seriously, unbelievable. That's why I'm saying if you could pick somebody and you're like, well, this guy really should be found guilty, you would pick this guy just because it's so barbaric. Someone between 4 and 7, someone between 3 and 5, someone between 5 and 8, someone who was 14, and someone who's between 4 and 7. We're not going to go into any detail. That is pretty much all you need to know. I think we have covered it. And when executing the search warrant, they go through again what happened with the phone. And he contacted law enforcement to inform them that they had not collected the cell phone and turned it over. Probably, just being really up front, you forgot to collect this cell phone. They were able to identify images, but were unable to identify many of the victims. The geolocations indicated that the majority of Kline's victims were within driving distance of his home. Very frightening. Kline was arrested at his girlfriend's home and told officers that the 2017 search warrant had been a wake-up call and that he no longer had problems with child P. Investigators found 2 images of child SA material on Kline's phone, which had been placed on the phone in 2019. In other words, totally false. He's saying, oh, I'm healed, totally better. I don't know what I was thinking before. And they're saying it's still happening. While in jail, Kline used a jail-issued chirp device to send text messages to others, following similar patterns to his communications with girls over social media. Kline asked his mother to reach out to women to be pen pals and began to communicate with them. I think that is, oh, here's his sentence I thought you would like. His continued selfish and sexual behavior, even after being exposed, indicate a character undeserving of appellate grace. Saying, no, his penalty completely just. And here's what the Court of Appeals said. Court of Appeals took a look at what he said and said, it is true that for counts 10 through 20, the amended information alleged that Kline possessed the images on February 25th, 2017, but that was merely the date that the images were seized. So what he's saying is these are really separate events, because just the fact that you got one photo here, another photo months later, and another photo months later, and that they're all on your phone at the same time doesn't compact everything down to one date. These are separate dates. These are dates where a different event happened each and every time. And the court said, no, we're going to affirm this, and you will serve your 43 years as sentenced by the court with whatever parole they elect to give. So let me pull out just a minute so we can talk a little bit more. So this entire discussion about Kegan Kline was critically important and yet had nothing to do with the Richard Allen case. At the same time, we know that law enforcement was very suspicious of Kegan Kline and believed he might have had something to do. And now I want to turn to what it is that law enforcement believed, why they believed it, and why Richard Allen wants to use Kegan Kline as a potential third-party culprit. Richard Allen wants to be able to say, I believe that this person might have been the one to kill Libby and Abby. I'm not the one. This guy, Kegan Kline, is far more suspicious. So here's how it all sort of began. And I'll share this again. The state filed a motion in limine saying, we want to keep out anything related to third-party motive. It's not relevant. It's prejudicial. That's will confuse the jury. None of this is relevant. And very specifically, they included Kegan Kline on the list. Last night, actually Monday night, we talked about another potential Ron Logan, number K or letter K down there. And we'll also definitely cover Brad Holder, because I think he's probably the one that Richard Allen thinks is most likely, or at least would like to talk about the most. So here is Richard Allen's response. Richard Allen said, here's what I want to talk about with Kegan Kline. Kegan Kline is the son of Jerry Anthony Kline. He was 22 years old in February 2017, and he and his dad, Jerry Anthony Kline, resided in Peru, Indiana in February 2017. Detective David Vito testified that Kegan Kline was communicating with Liberty German using a fake Snapchat account under the name of Anthony Schatz in the days leading up to and on February 13, 2017. The content of these messages is unknown. He further testified that Kegan Kline admitted to driving to Delphi, Indiana with his father, Jerry Anthony Kline, on February 13, 2017, and that Kegan Kline waited in the vehicle while Jerry Anthony Kline, the dad, went to the woods in the area where the Abigail Williams and Liberty German's bodies were ultimately found. This is unbelievable. Detective David Vito testified that Kegan Kline stated that when Jerry Anthony Kline returned to the vehicle, he had blood on him. Roland Purdy further testified that Kegan Kline admitted that they discarded a knife in a river when they were driving home. All of this evidence creates an inference that Kegan Kline and Jerry Anthony Kline murdered Abigail Williams and Liberty German. And you have to say, that's crazy looking. I mean, that is crazy when you put all those things together, that he was communicating with Libby German on the day she disappeared. on that day and deleted those messages from his phone. In fact, the entire app. He drove to Delphi, where her body was found. He says he stayed in the car while his dad, he admits, went to the woods in the area where the bodies were found. And his dad returns with bloody clothing. They discard a knife in a river when they're driving home. You can certainly understand why Richard Allen wants to use this. That is unbelievably direct, specific testimony. The court has said he cannot use any of that he is not permitted to use that. He'll be allowed to make a proffer to show the court what he believes, but he won't be allowed to do anything more than that. But that is crazy. I also wanted to show you a picture. This is Kegan Kline in the bottom there. There was an interview done by, I believe it was a Murder Sheet podcast with Kegan Kline in prison. And with a friend of his, not together, separately, the friend of his says that he was slimmer at the time. So I think you have to put aside whatever his weight is if you think it doesn't match. But the question is, does he look like Bridge Guy? That's the sketch that we have. And does he look like the person who is walking towards us, Bridge Guy? And so I put that in there so you can kind of make your own decisions. Now, I thought this was super interesting. There's a blog that I've really enjoyed reading that's called delphimurders.com. And one of the things they talked about was the hearing that happened and the defense argued that it ought to be allowed to produce this evidence and use this evidence. And here is what this blog says. Kegan Kline, and this is based on their summary of what happened at the hearing. Kegan Kline remains under scrutiny. Indiana State Police Trooper David Vito testified about intense investigations into Kline and his father, highlighting Kline's history of violence, app deletions, and discrepancies in his alibi. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. Vito noted physical similarities between Kline and the Bridge Guy in the video. Kline initially denied knowing Libby, but later claimed to be at the cemetery with his father that day, admitting to disposing of a phone and knife into the Wabash River. Kline has also admitted to having communicated with Libby via social media and planning a meetup on the day of the murders. The thing that I thought was most important in this is that they're saying that the state troopers have not stopped investigating. They don't necessarily believe he's off the hook. They think he still might be involved. They're still interested in whether or not he's the guy, Bridge Guy. Now, that doesn't mean they think Richard Allen is innocent. But they have made the statement at least twice that they are willing to look at other people as if they believe it could be a group as opposed to a single person. So I thought this was really an important summary coming straight from that hearing and suggests that law enforcement still believes that they might be, that Kegan Kline might be guilty. All right, I did want to show you one other thing too, because I think it's really interesting that law enforcement did not reveal this Anthony Schatz issue to the public right away. It was a good long while before they did that. Here is what happened.
Investigating the murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German, detectives with the Carroll County Sheriff's Office and the Indiana State Police have uncovered an online profile named Anthony Schatz. This profile was being used from 2016 to 2017 on social media applications, including but not limited to Snapchat and Instagram. The fictitious Anthony Schatz profile used images of a known male model and portrayed himself as being extremely wealthy and owning numerous sports cars. The creator of the fictitious profile used this information while communicating with juvenile females to solicit nude images, obtain their address, and attempt to meet with them. Pictured on your screen, you'll see images of the known male model and images of the fictitious profile sent to the underage females. We have already identified the male in these images that were used by Anthony Schatz. The male in the photo is not the person of interest in the investigation. Detectives are seeking information about the person who created the Anthony Schatz profile. Investigators would like any individual who communicated, met, or attempted to meet the Anthony Schatz profile to contact law enforcement by utilizing the tip email. Please provide as much information as you possibly can. For example, when you communicated with Anthony Schatz, how you communicated with the profile, what social media applications the account used, and if Anthony Schatz attempted to meet you or obtain your address. If you have saved images or conversations with Anthony Schatz profile.
All right, let me go ahead and pull that out. So as you can see, there is, without question, they are releasing the information about Anthony Schatz, but that didn't happen. What you just saw did not happen until December 6th of 2021, which was almost 4 years, well, more than 4 years after the girls were murdered. And that was when they came forward connecting the Anthony Schatz profile with the murders and asking for help from the public on that. So from all of the information about Kegan Kline, you can understand what I mean by saying that this is just somebody you want to be guilty, not to have done the crime, but he just elicits no sympathy. And there's nothing about this that makes it seem like you want him to, you're on his side. It's just really appalling behavior. I personally am not a big believer in coincidence. Granted, there are coincidences. There's no question about that. But the fact that he was communicating with Libby on the day she disappeared using a fake account, coupled with what he was using that fake account for, his statements putting him in the area where the bodies were found and his father being covered with blood, I don't see how this can be ignored. Not to say it gets Richard Allen off the hook, because more than one person could be involved, but it does at least merit, I think, the judge looking carefully at whether or not it should be allowed to be admitted at trial, because of the fact that I really do believe it's much more likely to be reversed on appeal if some of this evidence is kept out. I think it's pretty critical evidence that he's entitled to present. That's just my opinion. All right, so I will take a few questions, and if you would put your question marks at the beginning, that'll really help me. And let me go ahead and tell you, I am going to go to the Delphi murder trial. I'm actually going to be going to Delphi, and I am going to be watching the trial. It's not going to be televised, and we already knew that, but we definitely got the word that it will not be televised recently. And I think this is a really important trial. The only way we're going to really be able to get good information about this is if I go in person. And so that's my plan. I also want to announce that on Friday, after our regularly scheduled live stream, we will also be having a members only event. I am going to be unpacking what the plans are for my trip to the trial. You can go behind the scenes with me when I'm planning, what I've got up my sleeve, and maybe help me with some of this stuff. So I'm looking forward to seeing y'all. Friday, it'll be our regularly scheduled live stream is Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. So it'll be as soon as we finish, roughly 8, maybe something along those lines. Could be a little shorter or sooner. I don't know for sure. All right. So I am looking for question marks at the beginning. It looks like I'm probably going to answer maybe 1 or 2 because I am having a hard time with my voice still, which has been a long time. Okay. Carolina Crafter wants to know what's the legal basis for the judge's denial of third-party evidence. The judge said, and I can pull up that order pretty quick, I think, and show you exactly what the judge said. But essentially, she's saying you have to prove a connection using actual evidence, and you, Richard Allen, haven't done that. You haven't proven that. So I was going to see if I could pull up that order super quick, but it proves to be a little harder than I was thinking it would be. Okay, I'll just have to, that's the bottom line, is that she says, well, this is something that you haven't laid the foundation. You haven't given the basis that would connect these two things, because you can't just randomly put in bad information about other people and say, well, they could have done it. There has to be some reason to believe that person could have committed this crime. There has to be that connection there. And she's saying, you haven't done that. Let's see if this is it. Oh, this is it. Yay. All right, so let me add it to the screen and you can see it. Okay, so she's talking about the burden being on the defendants to show the nexus, the connection between the various things they want to show and the murders. It can't be based on speculation, conjecture, rumors, or hearsay, but rather on admissible evidence. And she's saying you didn't produce admissible evidence, and you're going to have to do that if you're going to want this in. But the hearing is over. The court, here's what the court says. The court will not permit the evidence submitted by the defense in support of their arguments regarding third-party perpetrators in the trial of this cause at the probative value of such evidence is greatly outweighed by confusion on the issues and its potential to mislead the jury. The court will allow that evidence to support an offer of proof at the trial if one is made by counsel. So, and what I believe the court is saying there is, I will let you put in evidence at trial so that when you go up on appeal, you can tell the court what evidence you would have had. But I'm not going to let the jury see it. I think she's made a definitive ruling on that. All right. Thank you, Mama Pinks. Delphi fun. I appreciate that. I am looking forward to it, but it is crazy financially. It makes zero sense. I'm sure I'll spend more going than I will ever make on YouTube. Denise Pelton, thank you. I really appreciate that as well. Oh, wonderful. The Amanda has gifted a Lawyer League membership. That's just in time since Friday will be our next members only event. And David Rogers is a new member. So fantastic. Glad to have you as a member, David. And thank you, the Amanda, Mama Pinks, Denise Pelton, and Cutley. I appreciate that from all of you. All right, I'll do like maybe one more question. I'm looking for those question marks at the beginning because that's my only shot in the middle of all this. How did law enforcement clear the Klines? Mimi of 2 asked. We don't know, Mimi. But from what DelphiMurders.com said in the summary of what the hearing that happened this past summer, they haven't cleared the Klines. They aren't completely sure that they weren't involved. They're just sure that Richard Allen was involved. They aren't sure that Kegan Kline and his dad are not involved. So they believe there still could be involvement. That's according to the summary provided by DelphiMurders.com. So we will follow that without question. What happened with investigating Kline's father? Nobody's been charged except Richard Allen. That's the part we know for sure. Exactly why and how they eliminated people, we don't know. With the one exception of Brad Holder, we do know that they believe he was at work at the time the murders were committed, and therefore he could not have been involved. We do know that. We'll be talking about him soon. And Amy asking about whether there's other evidence to corroborate his confession. I don't know. I'm very curious about what some of the cell phone data would show. We do know from the pleadings filed by Richard Allen that geofencing data shows 3 men in and around the area where the bodies were found, but we don't know a lot about that in either in terms of the details about it or how strong the evidence is. We just don't know the answer on that yet. All right. Is there, oh, thank you for the super sticker. I appreciate it very much from 6 Cents Amelia. Thank you. And Matt Skinner is saying he wants to say hi to April. Hey, April. and send some money for the Delphi trip. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. Well, I am looking forward to it. I will see y'all on Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, and the members only event will be right after that.